Am I the asshole for refusing to give my father the house my grandmother left me? My father left when I was 10. I came home from school one day and he was gone. My grandmother took me in, but that moment gave me issues I'm still working through. My grandmother passed away and I saw my father for the first time in 14 years at his mother's funeral. After the will was read, we learned that my grandmother had left me her property. My father was furious because he felt he had more rights given that that was his mother. He's harassing me to hand over the property to him and promising that when he dies I can have it. I don't want to give him the property because if my grandma wanted him to have it, she would have put it in her will. My father's been going around telling the family that I stole his mother's property right from under him and I'm trying to punish him for leaving me. Am I the asshole for refusing to give my father the house my grandmother left me? My father's been harassing me to hand over the property to him and promising that when he dies I can have it. But I don't want him to have it because if my grandmother wanted him to have it, she would have put it in her will. My father has actually been going around telling the family that I stole his mother's property right from under him and I'm trying to punish him for leaving me. My family has been reaching out to tell me that even if he abandoned me, I shouldn't forget the importance of filial piety and how being good to my father, even if he isn't good to me, is what makes a good daughter. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, but the comments and suggestions are beginning to wear me down. So, am I the asshole?
Am I the asshole for kicking my wife's father out of our wedding? My wife, 26, and I, 24, got married in early July. We decided to have a small 40-people wedding where masks were required, even for vaccinated folks. It was a dry wedding because my father used to struggle with alcoholism and I didn't want to trigger an accidental relapse. This was years ago, but I just wasn't willing to risk it. Instead, we offered virgin drinks and soda. Well, my wife's father didn't like this. My father-in-law was old friends with my dad and they'd gone through addiction together. My dad had taken the steps to get clean, but my father-in-law hadn't and still struggled. He constantly begged us to have an open bar at the wedding, saying that he didn't know if he could sit through the wedding sober. We ignored his request and held firm on the dry wedding. Well, that's when things went south. The ceremony passes and the reception begins. Everything is going well until we notice that my father-in-law is acting weird. Turns out he had bought a case of beer and hid it under one of the tables before the ceremony began. He was pestering my dad to drink with him just like old times. I was furious, beyond furious. I immediately called him out for his inappropriate behavior and demanded that he left. He started screaming at me, telling me that I was a dumb B and the F slur. My father-in-law and brother-in-law left, but my mother-in-law was pissed. She acted as though I didn't understand that he was addicted. I knew that, and if he felt like he couldn't go one night without it, then he shouldn't have showed up. However, his behavior was completely unacceptable. My wife feels that I'm justified in what I did, but my in-laws won't even talk to me. So, am I the asshole? Story time about how I pretended to be deaf the entire quarantine. When quarantine started, I started an online course for a few subjects. To provide some background, these aren't my school classes or anything, and I've never met these people before. There are maybe 10 other kids in the class, and the teacher is actually pretty great. So the first 2 days go pretty well, but on the third day I mess up big time. We were in between a physics class that had already been going on for an hour, and I'd completely gotten distracted halfway through. I have an incredibly low attention span, and this was already too much for me. When the teacher called my name to answer his question, I had no idea what he'd been talking about, so I tried to Google it. However, I have shitty internet, so it took a really long time to load, and the teacher was getting pissed as to why I wasn't responding and why I was typing. So, completely freaking out, I decided to text him on the Google Meet chat and make an excuse that my laptop's audio and microphone weren't working that day, and I'd been reading the subtitles, which took a long time to load, so I hadn't quite gotten to his question. In my immense panic, I phrased it somewhat vaguely and said, "I can't actually hear. I've been reading the subtitles and they take a long time to load." To which the instructor said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't aware that you're deaf." In my intense panic and anxiety, I just went along with it. Dumb as hell, I know. It actually worked out fine. I type out all the answers that were sent to me and even bought a hearing aid sometimes in Word in class. Now I say sometimes because I don't actually have the focus and commitment to remember to put it on every class. When asked about it, I told people in the class that even with the hearing aid, I can't hear much, so I don't usually bother wearing it. They bought it. Everyone in class liked me a lot and they found me very endearing. There's a girl, Carla, who said I had the most beautiful smile she's ever seen. So this was actually going really well for me. But, like most of my antics, this backfired on me big time. When I made this godforsaken decision all that time ago, I was sure I'd get away with it. However, about a week ago, the instructor decided to meet in real life and the lockdown in my country had been lifted. I spent all night watching videos and figuring out how to behave. I decided to pretend to also be completely dumb so I wouldn't have to speak in sign. It seemed very hard and I didn't want to try. So anyway, we meet up and everything goes well. No one uncovers my secret or anything. I spend the entire in real life meet with Carla, who's completely freaking stunning in real life. She's smart, funny, and she's kind. We keep handing each other notes on tissue papers and it's the cutest shit ever. I haven't been this attracted to anyone in my entire life. Toward the end of the meet, however, Carla hands me a tissue paper with one little heartbreaking sentence on it. "Will you date me?" That's when panic sets in. Part 2 of how I pretended to be deaf the entire quarantine. After pretending to be deaf in my class the entire quarantine and being asked out by a girl I fell for in the class, I panicked. I told her that I needed time to think and she was chill with it. So basically, I prepared really hard for the date. I googled what the appropriate flowers for apologizing for your lives are and got her white orchids. I then put on my best clothes and set out. She came to the date with a cute little notepad and 2 pencils for us to write notes in, which melted me instantly. But I was so anxious and nervous at first that I couldn't bring myself to tell her. However, as we sat there waiting for our order to arrive, I kind of snapped because of the guilt and scribbled down into the notebook, "Hey, there's not an easy way to break this, but I'm not actually deaf. Or dumb." To which she replied with, "I know you're not deaf, but you are pretty dumb," with a smiley face. At which point I said, "What the F?" out loud. She then laughed and explained that she thought I was so cute that she Googled me long ago and found my Instagram, which has highlighted stories from concerts where I'm screaming and vibing. So she only asked me out to figure out how long I'd keep it going. So she was actually playing me the whole time. I was feeling pretty bummed that she only wanted to date me for that, but nevertheless, I apologized profusely and explained everything. I told her that I totally understand if she wants to end the date now, but she didn't. We had a great time and aren't officially dating or anything, but we do have a second date planned. She also told me that while she understands why I did what I did and that anxiety, especially social anxiety, is so hard to deal with, but she also believes that I was a little offensive, especially with the hearing aid. She explained to me why that was so insensitive, and I'd like to apologize for anyone that I might have offended. It really wasn't my intention. Also, for our second date, we're planning to volunteer at a center for deaf kids so I can redeem myself. I'm also learning the basics of sign language for the visit next week.
Story time about why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So a little background information. In my town, on the 15th of June this year, 2 girls got kidnapped in my hometown. So I kind of knew these 2 girls. I mean, they went to my school, but that was really it. Because low-key, I didn't want to be friends with them, and I kind of hated them. They were in 7th grade, I was in 8th grade, so they were probably like a year younger than me. Anyway, so it was a Wednesday, and the last time they had been seen was at 8 p.m. with a 30-year-old man. They were supposedly doing drugs outside of a McDonald's. Well, I guess this man saw that they had been doing drugs, and he wanted some. Before that, I guess he kind of eased into the question because he was like talking to them, getting to know them, and I guess he thought he had a really good shot at getting some drugs. But when he asked, they said no. So then he asked a few more times and they finally gave them to him, but whenever they got closer, he grabbed both of them, put him in his van, and drove off. And he hid them in his house. Like for part 2. Part 2 of why you should never, ever, ever do drugs. So like I said, he asked for them again, and finally the girls decided to give him some. But when they got closer, he grabbed both of them and shoved them in his van, drove off. Well, he ended up driving to his house and decided to hide them there. Well, one of the girls' aunts posted something on Facebook saying that both of them were missing, and soon the news made an article that literally said, "Drug addict and her friend gets kidnapped." They went missing for like 6 days, and on the 22nd of June, they were found, but now they won't stop bragging about how fun it was to get kidnapped. And that is why, still to this day, I absolutely despise these girls.
My friend was telling me about her new Ring doorbell, you know, the camera kind, because she's very excited about it. And apparently there's an app that goes with it, and you can go into a message board on the app and people post videos and stuff. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah, it's great because people will say, hey, there's a sketchy car in the neighborhood, and they'll post a video of it so we can keep an eye out for it. And I was like, you're telling me that means there's a high chance that I'm on somebody's Ring message board somewhere and people are like, hey, this crazy lady has been driving around our block for the last hour screaming Adele at the top of her lungs. That's my private me time in front of your houses that I'm having, and people just have a video of that probably. A nice lady got in my head a couple weeks ago because she said, wow, you make really intense eye contact. And I said, oh, sorry. And she said, no, it's good that you make eye contact. That's a compliment. It's a good thing that you make good eye contact with people. And I said, thank you. Except now I don't know how to make eye contact with people because I'm thinking about it all the time because she got in my head and I don't know what intense eye contact means or how it's interpreted. Now, when I talk to people, instead of just talking to people, I'll be thinking, oh, I've been making eye contact for a long time. Maybe I should look at the wall or the ceiling or the floor. Like, have I blinked recently? How do you look at people? How? I was babysitting my friend's kids and I said, what do you guys want to do tonight? And the oldest child said, we should play basketball. And the youngest child said, we should play hide and seek. And the middle child said, we should kill somebody. And I was like, that is an interesting pitch, middle child. What if we just do the first 2 things and then we just see where the night takes us? I went to the car dealership last week to trade in my old car for this new old car. And when I got there, I was like, listen, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. The only reason I'm doing this is because for years, everyone's been telling me that it's something that I should do, okay? Which is also what I said on my very first day of therapy. And the car salesman said, yeah, of course, like I can take you around, show you a couple cars. And so we found this car and I was like, I'll take it. Never mind. No, I won't. Yes, I will. I do want it. No, actually, can we go look at the Subaru? No, I'll take the car. I do want the car. No, actually, can we go outside and look at the car just one more time? Because I'm not sure. And I was up and down. And then I started to get emotional and I was like, I'm sorry. It's just like, I don't want to trade in my old car because I really love my old car and there's so many memories and like, it was my very first car I ever bought and I don't want to get rid of it, you know? And he said, no, I don't know. I like buying new cars, but are you hungry? I'm hungry. We should go get some food. So I got in a car with a stranger and he took me to get a burger and shake. And I was like, oh, I think I do want the car. I think I was just a little bit hungry. And he was like, were ya? A few years ago, I was telling my hairdresser about this guy that I dated who cheated on me, and I could tell the whole salon had gotten quiet, and they were all listening in because drama. And so I finished the story with, yeah, I just don't know what was going through his head. And from across the room, a lady getting her hair washed yelled, I don't know, it sounded to me like you two were on a break.